Master Triforce for www.WatchMePlayGames.com, and this is WatchMePlay Metal Gear Rising Revengeance Part 4. We just got done with the dog boss, and here we go. If you press the D-pad, you can access your items, sub-weapons, rocket launcher, and you press L2. Alright, I haven't done it yet. So, yeah, kinda. Really? Totally, like, I was trying to take out this giant, one of those mech enemies, and I aimed the rocket launcher, dude, I swear, like, I had a perfect shot. And as soon as I shoot it, he sees me, and then all the other people see me, and the robot comes running around the other side. I totally missed him. Like, I think you have to be, like, close to actually get them. Yes. So if you do look around the environments, you can find some, items, and then, like this, chests, repair now, base. Did not press it fast.
Dang.
It's kind of funny how, like, all this pressing the buttons real quick started with, like, Resident Evil 4 and God of War, and they're still doing it. Like, you'd think they could come up with some kind of different mechanic.
You're supposed to be stronger than this.
Oh man, I forgot to. Okay, good.
You know, I almost felt sorry for the little guy.
What? That UG? Why? Because it couldn't disobey its orders?
Yeah, that, and I don't know, it didn't seem especially interested in fighting you somehow.
But was it really thinking on its own? Maybe it was all just an act. Get me to second guess myself.
You could be right. It's just, It didn't seem like just another UG to me. Maybe it's because I'm such a dog lover.
That was no cuddly puppy, Courtney. It was a wolf, and a nasty one at that.
No, I know. You're right. I didn't mean to sound critical. Whatever it was, it attacked you. You had no other choice.
Didn't have much freedom myself, did I?
Girls.
Didn't you say you'd been here before, Boris?
Once, back when it was still Soviet territory.
Seems like it'd be a lovely place, if it weren't a war zone.
The Pearl of the Black Sea, they called it, back when more Russians lived there. It was a very popular resort spot for the USSR. This is before the wall fell, of course. Then Russia and Georgia began to fight over the area.
Kicking off the war in the early 90s.
Georgia was a Soviet republic. Abkhazia, a semi-autonomous state within it. The Soviets liked to stoke ethnic rivalries between the two. And not just there, in all the outlying territories. It kept them easier to control.
But with the Russians no longer watching over the two.
Duh. The Abkhaz were scared. They knew an independent Georgia would swallow their nation sooner or later. So they took advantage of a Georgian military coup to declare their own independence in '92. Of course, the new Georgian government was not happy to hear this, and so...
The same old story.
And with Russia supporting the Abkhaz, it was a stalemate. 2 years later, the ceasefire meant Abkhazia was finally independent, but not officially. They still are not formally recognized by Georgia, or most of the international community.
This region is filled with breakaway states.
This is true. There is South Ossetia, also in Georgia. Transnistria in East Moldova, and Nagorno-Karabakh, which broke from Azerbaijan. In any case, even Russia did not officially recognize Abkhazia as independent until 2008. So it was not long ago Sukhumi was a war zone. It has changed dramatically since then. They have been rebuilding steadily, with Russian support, ever since SOP was shut down.
Good to hear. But doesn't that leave them wrapped around Russia's little finger?
It does. Which is why Dolzaev is calling for a truly independent state. He wants an Abkhazia that takes orders from no one. Not Georgia, not Moscow.
Sounds like a worthy cause.
Duh. But many Abkhaz are happy with the reconstruction Russian support makes possible. Few of his fellow countrymen were interested in what Dolzaev had to say. At first.
And then Desperado showed up.
Exactly. They brought the sad ending to this little history lesson. It is no wonder so many people mistrust PMCs, eh?
I suppose not.
The thing that I love about Metal Gear Solid games is all the history, and they really do a really good job of mixing history with fiction and giving you some, what do they call that genre? Tom Clancy's type stuff, feature fiction or whatever it's called, historical fiction, I guess. People who pay attention will probably remember when Russia and Georgia were going at it. I think it was in 2010, and President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton were warning Russia not to interfere anymore in Georgia. So it's interesting to hear them talk about topical subjects that are recent, and as well as give a lot of information that most people probably didn't know about. Of course, the end there, I think they were going into the video game storyline with all the SOP stuff.
Boris, do we have anything else on Dolzaev? Any more on his background?
Very little confirmed intel, but it seems he is a former Chechen insurgent. He claims he was part of the Chechen National Congress when they declared independence in '91. This was just after the famous coup attempt in Moscow in August. Things were not stable. Gorbachev lost his political power. It was Yeltsin who signed the Belovezha Accords.
Right. It created the Commonwealth of Independent States. All republics that made up the USSR became independent.
The problem is, Chechnya was never a true republic. It was an autonomous state, but still part of the Russian Republic.
Like how Abkhazia was an autonomous state within the Georgian Republic.
Duh. The same kind of sad story. Russia does not recognize Chechnya as independent. They send troops and the fighting begins. It is said 250,000 Chechens were killed over the 2 wars that followed. 1/4 the entire population. The Chechens were forced to give in, and the war officially ended.
But the rebels kept on fighting.
Insurgents fled into Caucasus Mountains, formed several factions. They waged guerrilla war on Russia ever since. We think Dolcev is the leader of just such a rebel group.
Sounds like Russia bears some of the blame for radicalizing him and his men.
I love my homeland, but she is not perfect. What nation is? Just remember, this could all be smoke. We cannot even confirm Dolcev is truly ethnic Chechen.
Say he is, though. What would he be after here in Abkhazia?
Some Chechen militants volunteered to fight for the Abkhaz in their war in the early 90s. But when Russia recognized Abkhazia to keep Georgia in check, they also began funding recovery.
Which the Dozaev crowd see as a play to gain influence. But wasn't the Chechen recovery funded by Russia?
Duh. And many rebels believe this is why their people gave up on independence. Perhaps this is exactly why Dolzaev is here, to alert the people before it can happen again. But if the Abkhaz people are not interested in fighting, his plan could backfire.
So in a way, it's Russian policy that brought him here. He thinks he's fighting to make these people free.
Whatever his motives, no one elected him and no one gave him a permit for murder. Now that he is allied with Desperado, he is too dangerous to ignore.
So much information to take in.
Raiden, if you ever get lost, use by useful. Raiden, by
Okay,
useful.
so now he's repeating.
What was up with that wolf dog, Eugene? Some pretty freaky shit.
Hadn't thought too much about it.
Really? I keep wondering, why give it intelligence if you're not gonna let it think for itself?
Good question.
I mean, I guess it makes sense if it improved combat performance.
Now that you mention it, it didn't fight like your typical Eugene. It felt more like I was facing off against a cyborg.
Oh. I guess the added smarts make for a tougher opponent after all.
That's not what I mean. It wasn't really tougher than your average UG. More like it was, I don't know, hesitant. It didn't follow through on its attacks either.
Guess that's why it was still just a prototype. But then why put it out on the front lines?
Who knows? Maybe it was the field test. In any case, probably not the result they were hoping for.
Right. Didn't follow through on its attacks.
One thing I don't understand, Kev. Desperado must be violating all kinds of laws here. Why hasn't the international community gotten involved?
Well, from a purely legal standpoint, it's actually not so cut and dry. First, there's the fact that Abkhazia is still not a member of the UN. Only Russia and a few other breakaway states even recognize it as a sovereign nation. In the eyes of most of the international community, Abkhazia is technically still part of Georgia, which would make this an internal Georgian issue.
Guess you can't really call it a coup if the displaced government was never seen as legitimate.
Exactly. And even if everyone agrees it was a coup, it can be tough to tell which regime is more legit. Sometimes you'll see the military topple a dictator and establish a provisionary government, for example. Now, if they confirmed atrocities were taking place, the UN could deploy troops, recognized government or not.
Yeah, but they learned their lesson in Somalia.
Right. Ever since then, they've been a lot more reluctant to get involved in civil wars.
Interesting.
So what about the US and Russia? What's their take on all this?
Well, America was never very friendly with Abkhazia or South Ossetia in the first place. And the Georgian government's a regional ally, so the U.S. really has no cause to intervene. Russia wants the old government back, of course. The regime open to their influence. I doubt they'll opt for any large-scale action. Tensions with Georgia are running high already. But you can bet your ass they won't just sit on the sidelines. Boris has got a lot of connections in the Russian bureaucracy. Ex-military buddies. The Abkhaz are officially our clients, but I'm sure it's Russia that chose us. Maybe footing the bill, too. They can't use their actual special forces, so they call us instead. That's the beauty of PMCs.
We're not bound by the same rules as state-sponsored military.
Other countries would be outraged if the Russians went into places we can go freely. From our side, no state to answer to means we can run things as we see fit. By our own code, no compromises.
Then again, there's no one to say our code is what's right.
True. And opinions on that change from person to person, situation to situation. But you let your moral compass waver at all in this business, and real people pay the price. Money's always a factor, of course, but when it becomes the factor, that's when you got problems. The Montreux document lays out guidelines for what PMCs can and can't do, but there's no way to enforce it. A lot of people see that as the fatal flaw of the entire industry. After all, that's how we end up with rogue outfits like Desperado. Then again, it's also what leaves Maverick free to go after them. The industry has a bad rep, but it isn't good or bad itself. It's up to the morals of those who work in it. All we can do is what we think is right and try to lead by example. Anyway, sorry, you know how I am about this stuff. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Don't apologize. That's exactly why we took this job. Taking Sakumi back is the right thing to do.
Agreed. And now, that's all up to you, buddy.
We always talk about the Montreux document, but why hasn't anyone made it legally binding?
People are trying to, both inside and outside the industry, but it's easier said than done. Even with 17 countries on board, it's still just a set of guidelines. They'd need to negotiate an actual treaty based on that agreement for it to become official. And we both know getting everyone to sign on wouldn't be easy.
Yeah. Every government's for regulating PMCs until it restricts how they can use them themselves.
It gets complicated when you try to put it all in exact legal terms, too. A treaty would need to distinguish a PMC's home nation, the one it's active in, and the one that contracted it. Then you have the industry itself, which isn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of greater regulation. There's just so many different parties involved, and everyone's got their own motivations. So, yeah, long story short, we're a long way from getting anything legally binding anytime soon.
Sorry I asked.
Ryder, head for the oil refinery.
Alright, so spoke to everything that he has to say. Actually, that's
Alright then. Hey, Ryden, let me ask you something. The Patriots. Why would AIs do all of that? I can see why people would want all the money, but AIs? What did they stand to gain from it all?
Who knows? Maybe they didn't even know. Optical Neuro AIs aren't your typical PCs. They learn over time, change in unpredictable ways. The core AI, JD, was bent on expanding the war economy. Maybe to fund the Patriots' other activities. Or maybe that's just the way it evolved, like a secondary objective that took over. One of the other AIs said it was created to filter out unnecessary information, gossip, trivia, all for the sake of future generations, to drive the evolution of the human race. Or so it said. Was that the truth? Or a lie? To manipulate me? Who can say?
To think. Something like that. Running a nation. And America, no less. It's terrifying. Thank God they were all destroyed.
But did it really change that much?
Maybe not. Contractors still gotta eat after all. Soldiering for hire's always been a risky business. But at least before it was good money. There was a decent chance you could get rich and retire early. All that disappeared during the SOP years. Demand was high, but the workforce was flooded. More and more soldiers were willing to work for cheap. It got so you'd have to work years before you could even pay back your initial training and insurance fees.
Yeah, I can see Sundowner's point.
The global recession certainly didn't help. Unemployment shot up across the U.S. and the EU. Even if contractors gave up and packed it in, there weren't any jobs waiting for them back home.
The irony is the recovery was all war-driven. It wasn't a general recovery at all. Not only did globalization exploit the poor countries, but it crippled first world employment too.
And SOP's gone. But now we've got these PMCs that are basically mobsters. Just thugs in uniform.
Yeah, not a pretty picture.
A most fascinating opponent, wouldn't you say?
What did you make of it, Doc?
Well, everything it said seems feasible enough. It's true all UGs feature high-level AI these days. Given enough time to adapt and learn, a neuro-AI could certainly become able to comprehend speech. Then, with the right interface, speech and conversation will be possible.
But what about it having actual intelligence? John Searle disproved the viability of the Turing test back in 1980. In other words, just because something talks like a person doesn't mean it's really thinking. It could just be following some program designed to make it seem as intelligent as possible.
I'm impressed. You seem quite knowledgeable in this field.
I had a pretty memorable chat with an AI once, about 10 years ago. After that, I did a little reading.
Ah, yes, of course. The Patriot AI. I heard of this.
Was it actually intelligent, or just programmed to pretend? I'm still not sure.
I suppose it depends on how one defines intelligence. For example, many term chess-playing AIs and such as having sectional intelligence. Some in the field believe that sentience or self-consciousness is a necessary part of the definition. When you ask if this UG had intelligence, I suspect this is more your criteria?
Yeah, of course. Then you could ask, how do you define sentience exactly? And on and on and on.
Indeed. These terms can indicate a wide variety of meanings depending on one's understanding. Perhaps it is less important to ask if the AI was intelligent or not than to ask how did the AI operate. After all, labels are useful only when they further pursuit of the truth. And that, as you well know, is the goal of all science.
Sure, Doc. Thanks. I guess. Doc, that wolf UG, you think it's possible to repair it?
Why do you ask?
Just curious.
Well, normal brain tissue degrades starting approximately 3 minutes after the heart stops. With neural AI, however, the spin of the internal electrons is retained even after electric power is cut. Assuming there is no damage to the actual AI hardware itself, yes, repairs should be possible.
Okay.
Whatever state it is in, I would certainly appreciate it if you could bring it back with you.
I'll see what I can do. But the mission takes priority.
Of course. I would never suggest otherwise.
But let's just say this thing is what it claimed to be. You think there are other intelligent UGs out there? Because if that's the case, I've got a feeling future missions are only going to get rougher.
Indeed. Dozens of UGs chatting away on the field will be enough to drive anyone to distraction. Neural AIs are not von Neumann computers, keep in mind. Structurally, they are closer to human brains. Hardware and software are indivisible. The learning data can't simply be transplanted to other AIs.
So it can't be copied or backed up either.
Normal UGs must be taught individually. This entails streaming provisional audiovisual and body sensor data until it's ready to be shipped out. This process can be sped up by increasing and improving processing speed. But I have no data on how long it would take to train such an AI how to converse. I couldn't even tell you if there's a training program established for such a thing in the first place. If it is indeed a prototype, it likely learned and honed its skills via the process of trial and error.
So it's unique.
I cannot say with certainty, but I have not heard of any UG like this before. I would imagine that it was telling the truth when it called itself an experimental prototype. There may be others. Or perhaps it's the only one in existence.
Glad we narrowed that down, then.
Very, very awesome.
My apologies, Raiden. I realize we never concluded our discussion on carbon nanotube muscle fibers.
Didn't we?
CNT drove major innovations in the field of cybernetics, not to mention unmanned gears. As I'm sure you are aware, Walker-type UGs require numerous linear actuators in order to function. Previously, organic polymers or cultivated muscle cells were used to that purpose. But the advancement of CNT technology allowed for comparable power in a far more compact package. This meant the same size UGs could be equipped with even greater firepower. Take the redesigned Metal Gear Ray, for example.
They took all the space the old artificial muscles filled up and stuffed it with weapons.
Precisely. Of course, UGs have improved in many ways, all to keep pace with cyborg advancements, you know. After all, the original Metal Gear program was designed to unite infantry and weaponry. As an evolution of this concept, the UG is now in direct competition with the cyborg. And the cyborgs already have an advantage with their maneuverability and smaller size, as you well know. Of course, UGs are not dependent on the skills of a human host.
Long story short, watch out for UGs.
Well, yes, basically. Cyborgs have matched unmanned gears in many respects, but then UG tech advances every day. Do not underestimate any you might run into.
Copy that.
A lot of this is over my head because they really get scientific and get into the nitty-gritty details of things, but it's still really interesting.
Doc, all the UG talk got me thinking. Why don't we see more manned gears?
Ah, yes, with a pilot. The bipedal tanks and such things, I must confess I have not followed the deal closely as of late. But then, who has? Since Metal Gear A, all the advances and the funding in mobile artillery has been UGs.
So why is that?
Well, UGs take many more forms. Aerial drones, treaded tanks, armored transports. And they are perfect for the 3D work. Jobs too dull, too dirty, or too dangerous for men. True Metal Gears with a pilot and nuclear payload were huge and very expensive. They were not practical. It turned out the greater need was for smaller, cheaper units, deployed more easily and in greater numbers. So the field narrowed in on this aspect of gear design, an all-terrain link between infantry and artillery. But even then, the UG models were more popular. In most cases, they simply made more sense.
But aren't there situations where you'd want gear-level power, but also a human pilot there to make decisions? UG AI has gotten better, but it's still terrible at handling anything unexpected.
But Raiden, this is exactly the role the cyborg has taken. On the manned gear, any advantage of a cyborg in offensive power comes with a matching increase in size. This makes it so large as to no longer be practical for most infantry missions. Conversely, the smaller models are so close to cyborgs that, well, what is the point?
Cyborgs are smaller, cheaper, more nimble.
Precisely. Perhaps soon we will see the cyborg take the place of the UG, as the UG has done to the manned gear.
What, with wings? Scooting around on wheels?
Why do you laugh? It is the logical next step to have a human brain integrated into a tank or a plane.
Now you're getting into some B-grade sci-fi territory, Doc.
Oh, but it is all quite possible, I assure you. Just consider the possibilities. A humanoid frame for everyday life, yes, but the brainstem can be easily extracted and inserted into whatever chassis best suits the mission. So, yes, I suppose the paradigm could be flipped on its head. As UGs become smaller and smarter, they could begin to fill the cyborg's role. They will come to resemble them more and more in form and function, no doubt. I suppose at some point they will no longer be UGs, but androids. Glorious!
I wonder who writes all this stuff. Like, I wonder how much influence, how much of it is actually composed by Hideo Kojima himself, the creator of Metal Gear Solid, and how much of it is just like freaking team of writers. Like, it seems like you would need so much writers to come up with all this stuff.
One thing about fighting these cyborgs, Doctor, it's strange in a way.
Oh? How do you mean?
I can slice them to pieces, and with all their pain and emotion suppressed, they don't feel a thing. At least against SOP troops. You never forgot they were real people. But these cyborgs, it starts to feel like I'm taking on unmanned gears, robots, not living, breathing men.
Intriguing. Tell me, does it help assuage the natural feelings of guilt? There is no reason to avoid this topic. Man has wrestled with it as long as there has been war. Guns were a huge step, of course, as it became easier to take a life, physically and mentally. Then, destroying a tank or airplane, where you no longer had to see your enemy's face as he perished. Eventually, remote-controlled drones further distanced the killer from his victim, much like the video games. I suppose cyborg soldiers could be seen as yet another step in dehumanizing death.
Maybe. I do feel like I could forget I'm taking the lives of real people here.
Well, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't necessarily be taking their lives, strictly speaking. So, as long as the brain is supplied with oxygen, a cyborg can survive most anything, even if respiration is disabled. An emergency supply of liquid oxygen would remain in the bloodstream. The cyborg would enter a state of hibernation, yes. But so long as the brainstem were retrieved intact, it could be attached to another body and revived.
That's how the two Gemini survived.
The Gemini? Ah, yes, the twin cyborgs from the motorcade.
But Desperado cyborgs are different.
Physical self-destruction is a fail-safe security measure. In any case, it is unfortunate that Prime Minister Money was human. Perhaps if he had been a cyborg, he might have survived as well.
We'll never know. Besides, a robotic prime minister? I doubt anyone would accept that. Inside or outside the country.
Yes, I suppose fear always does trump logic when it comes to the general public.
Exactly.
Very interesting. I like all of this talk. It's really cool.
Brighton, something I'd like to ask in our last chat. Did you consider opting for emotion restraints? I can understand one might be leery of the procedure, but it is all perfectly reversible, I assure you. You could implement them for a mission and then do away with them as soon as it was over.
I'll pass, thanks. To be honest, I have a problem with the whole concept.
And what is that?
Decisions are about more than just logic. Lose your emotions, and you risk not being able to relate to how normal people see right and wrong. Your conscience could end up different, warped, or who knows, maybe gone altogether. Boris agrees. That's why no Maverick cyborgs are allowed to use emotion restraints.
An understandable perspective. There is some data to support your belief. MRI scans have isolated the brain activity associated with choosing between good and bad. Mostly in the dorsolateral, prefrontal, and central orbitofrontal cortexes, to be precise. But this entire area of the brain is known to process emotion, not logical thought. It would seem to support the idea that emotion indeed plays a role in values-based decisions.
Well, there you go.
But another argument can be made, that it is emotion that sparks human conflict in the first place. All the great wars, all the great atrocities, would they have happened if not for emotional decisions?
Maybe not. But we can't just ignore the worldview of most of the planet. We don't exist in a vacuum here. To most of the world, a PMC operating on its own guidelines would be like a terrorist organization. They'd say we used brute force to impose our strange values on others. And they'd be right.
Yes, well, you have a point.
Abuse of emotion restraints has become a hot topic. Suppressing fear tends to boost aggression, which has led to cases of excessive violence.
True, achieving the right balance is difficult.
But on the other hand, it makes it possible to intentionally make people more aggressive. Even a child can become a bomb just waiting to explode.
Yes, it is very likely that Desperado is employing just such a technique.
I find it interesting that, as far as I can tell, they seem to consciously or unconsciously, probably more consciously, avoid the topic of Muslim extremism and Muslim terrorism, which makes up the vast bulk, even in Russia, of terrorist acts.
Doc, that wolf UG, you think it's possible to repair it?
Why do you ask?
Just,
Well, assume whatever.
I'll see.
Of course.
but let's just, because if that...
Indeed, neural paths.
So-
no, this I could if
So-
I would
Glad.
So much.
Doc, that wolf,
Why,
Okay,
just...
so now they're
well,
repeating.
assume what of course.
But let, because it...
Indeed, neural paths which
So it can't...
normal this process I could if it is
So it...
I would have made.
Glad we...
Alright, let's save. Now that we talked to everyone.
Affirmative. Save complete.
You know, our last chat got me thinking about all the problems with PMCs.
Oh? You come up with a solution to all our industry's ills, then?
Yeah. Let's just change the acronym.
That's your solution? Just change the name and change the reputation, eh? To what? I know you like private security provider, but that'd be PSP. Private military security? PMS?
Well, the Montreux document uses PMSC, right? Private Military and Security Company. A bit more comprehensive. And a bit more awkward, too, I guess. Seems like it never really caught on.
Yeah, we only use PMSC on contracts or when we're specifically excluding older style PMCs.
I guess once a name sticks, that's it. Old habits are hard to break.
Right. Besides, I think we're past the point that a name change would do much for the industry's image.
I get your point. Though it did work once before, we don't call them mercenaries anymore, do we?
Alright. Now that that's done, head to the waypoint. Ah, yeah, this part.
Hammerheads have a nasty habit of firing all their missiles at once when they are about to go down.
UGs have habits?
Of course. They run on optical neural AIs. They can learn behavior the same as you or me.
And since all units in a UG line are trained in the same way with the same capabilities...
They develop similar fighting habits, yes.
Alright, so what do I do once it starts unloading all those missiles?
Ninja run. Use the projectiles as stepping stones to close the distance between you and the hammerhead. Hammerheads have a nasty habit of Of course.
And since all units in a UG line are trained in this...
They develop similar fight...
Alright, so what do I do once it starts unloading all those missiles?
Ninja run. Use the projectiles as stepping stones to close the distance between you and the hammerhead. The hammerhead missiles have an inertia fuse. Get them before they stop and they will not detonate. And if it's too late to run, try blade mode.
Sorry, buddy. I got nothing right now. Maybe try asking Doctor or Boris.
You okay, Raiden? Save complete. Be careful, Raiden.
Okay, so dodge the missiles, ninja run, blade mode. Oh, rock on. See if there's anything else hidden around. Another one? Homing missile. Yes. Okay, let's go look at my homing missile. Nice, 2 of them. Surface-to-air homing missile, a guided missile launcher equipped with both traditional passive infrared guidance as well as millimeter wave active radar homing, allowing it to penetrate flare-based defenses while still offering easy fire and forget targeting. Oh, jeez. Oh, there's another one right there. Okay. Let's keep exploring this area before we run. Is that one right there? Nope.
Impressive, Raiden.
Yeah. Gonna have to do a lot more than float around like that to beat me.
Indeed, indeed. So, now you are in Sukumi Old Town. Pretty much still the same as after war in 1990s.
Looks like it.
Make your way through town. You'll need to pass through an abandoned hotel to reach the hill. The hotel is serving as headquarters for cyborg forces patrolling the new city.
Sounds like a blast. And why exactly am I walking right into enemy HQ?
Well, it's not a stealth mission, eh? Striking them will weaken their entire forces. Besides, we don't want them stabbing you in the back.
All right. At least I'll get to top off my electrolytes.
This is the spirit. Trust me, it is easier than knocking on refinery front gate.
I will be right back. Alright guys, unfortunately I have an errand to run, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. This is a good place to end it since we just took out the freaking awesome helicopter boss. It's a pretty cool boss fight. Yeah, so thanks for watching. This has been Astral Triforce. Please check out www.watchmeplaygames.com for more good stuff. And tune in next time, and we will continue into the city.